Have a seat, be comfortable. Okay, folks, welcome to the cyber track session on defense of key terrain. I'd like to ask Mr. Robert Zapata to come forward, please. We owe a debt of thanks to Diligent Consulting for sponsoring our track sessions. It's through sponsorships like Diligent that gives us the opportunity to bring military, industry, and academia together and to promote the discussion that is at the core of what AFCEA is all about. Mr. Zapata is the Program Manager for Cybersecurity and Intelligence for Diligent Consulting. So again, sir, thank you very much for your support.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. This morning, we're pleased to have with us an excellent panel of practicing experts in cyber defense operations. The panel will address current Air Force efforts to mature defensive cyberspace operations and cyber protection teams. They will discuss the roles of CPTs in defining, mapping, prioritizing, and defending key terrain, and they'll also address the relationship between CPTs and computer network defense service providers. Our panel moderator this morning is Colonel Chad Lemaire, Vice Commander of the 688th Cyberspace Wing at JBSA Lackland. In this capacity, he assists in leading over 1,500 professionals in executing cyberspace operations, as well as developing, training, exercising, and testing innovative information dominance capabilities in support of Air Force and joint warfighters. Colonel Lemaire has 24 years of experience as a cyberspace operator and previously commanded the 92nd Information Operations Squadron, the Skulls, where he organized the unit to conduct cyber hunt missions on Air Force and DoD networks. Additionally, he served as Chief of Cyber Operations at the Combined Air and Space Operations Center and was the lead operational planner for the Expeditionary Cyber Support Element in Afghanistan. Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Lemaire.
Thank you. So I'll stand at least for just a moment, and then I'll introduce a little bit more about me. So Rick wanted us to introduce a little bit, say some of the things we've worked on, and then obviously we're going to concentrate on defensive cyberspace operations. Boy, where do you start? I mean, quite literally. There is so much going on in the defensive cyberspace arena. It really is difficult to start. So what I'm going to do, since our talk here today is primarily focused on cyber protection teams, or CPTs, I'd like to start there. But before I do, I'll be remiss if I didn't say thank you to Mr. Lipsey for asking us to come here and do this. And then I will address our relationship with the CNDSP up front. And because we believe in this relationship, I've asked Colonel Pam Woolley to attend. She is in charge of the 26th Cyberspace Operations Group, which has a couple of units that 24th Air Force, who is the CNDSP for the Air Force, has delegated almost all the responsibility to in terms of carrying out CNDSP duties. So I've asked her to be here as we talk about that to make sure we're all saying the same thing, really. Okay. You heard most of my background. I will tell you, I've watched, and General Peterson was moderated the earlier group this morning, and he hit it on the head, right? So I've watched us go from, information assurance and network assurance to what we now call mission assurance. And as I look at mission assurance, one of the things that you have to do in order to get there is to do defensive cyberspace operations. And so that's what we're going to focus on this morning. And it's been a joy over the course of my career to do that. Now, I understand, before I get started, that there are a lot of planted personnel in the audience. So if you're a 92nd individual, because once a skull,
always a skull.
You are not allowed to ask questions at first. You need to let them ask the questions, and then if we reach a pause, we'll talk about it. Okay. So there are 4 levels of, and bear with me, I'm going to start calling them CPTs, Cyber Protection Teams, okay, Cyber Protection Teams. In the Greater Cyber Mission Force, CMF, it's one of the types of teams that are built. The other types of teams are mission teams and support teams. We're not here to talk about those, but we are here to talk about the cyber protection teams. The primary role of those teams is defense. And so there are 4 types of CPTs, so I'll quickly go over them. And I know some of you here, right, are planning on talking about some of this, so I hope I don't steal too much of your thunder with going into this. And once I discuss that, I'm going to pause and then let them give you a little bit of background, because I think it'll help fill in kind of where we are in terms of, but the relationship is with cyber protection teams. All right, so the first type of team is what we define as a service reallocated CPT. A service reallocated CPT, in short, is a team that General Wilson, so the 24th Air Force AF Cyber Commander, has at his disposal to send out within the terrain that he's charged to defend. All right, so think primarily AFNet, the Air Force network, but not necessarily limited to that. The second type of team is the DODIN team, so the DoD Information Network, Joint Force Headquarters DODIN. They go out on missions in support of JFHQ DODIN in whatever capacity that they need them. The third type of CPT is the combatant commander teams, and they are teams that go out, as the name indicates, in support of combatant commanders. So we have, so far we've said the 3. The last team are what we call national CPTs, and those are teams that are going to work for a CNMF, the Cyber National Mission Force, and will be sent out to the times and places that are chosen by who is now Major General Nakasone. And so I'm gonna make one more announcement. I don't know that I see him here, which is good. So I'm a little cautious here because we have Lieutenant General retired Hernandez. He was around earlier. I don't see him, which is good. But he's a retired. He was the R Cyber Commander. So I'm sure he'll keep the Air Force in check if we go off kilter here. So I'm really counting on that. So before we talk about other things, I do have a couple of other points, but I don't want to talk too much at the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and we'll just start with Major Amin, and he's going to introduce himself and give you a little bit about his background.
Good afternoon. Name is Major Sunil Amin. I'm at the 834th COS here at Joint Base San Antonio, the DO for that. And most the CPTs that we have within the 834th are actually supporting combatant command CPTs. And as far as the background, so I've had a little bit of cyber experience, especially working over at the 561st NOS whenever we were converting that into the AFNet. And it was quite an experience. That was the first time that you really got that true flavor of operations, and especially during that time frame when we started switching over from that comm support role over to the operational side. And then from there, I actually came PCS'd over to Lackland.
In the area you'll talk about?
Oh, the area that I'll be talking about is the joint training that we are trying to develop with the other services.
Yeah, so before Major Crepo goes, what I want to say is we're giving you the areas that they're ready to discuss that hopefully you can be forming some questions, right? We want this to be a dialogue between us. So be thinking about those questions within those areas that they're going to tell you about. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Crepo. My background and experience is stemmed mostly on the operational side for the last 8 years or so. So this is new to me to look at this from a different angle. I've been the Director of Operations for the 92nd Cyber Operations Squadron for about 5 months now. So I've got limited on the defensive side, but I've gotten up to speed pretty quickly, hopefully, on the weapons system and the weapons system training, which is going to be where I'm focused today. For us, for the 92nd Cyberspace Operations Squadron, we have 3 CPTs. All 3 CPTs are part of the service reallocated teams, just as Colonel Lemaire alluded to earlier. So if we have questions specific to that, I'd also be able to answer those, as well as Captain Gould next to me.
Thanks, Major Crepo. My name is Patrick Gould. I'm actually one of those service reallocated CPT leads in the 92nd Cyber Operations Squadron. 5 Charlie, once a skull, always a skull, Colonel Lemaire. So the topic that I'll be covering on any type of questions that you guys may have is the functional mission analysis cycle. So how do we turn that mission assurance mission from a mission statement into cyber key terrain? So we know where to focus our efforts as a CPT, as a cyber protection team. So there's a little bit of shift in paradigm here where we're no longer worried about systems and networks. We're more worried about the missions that the supported commanders deem are critical. So there's a little bit of a process to get from that mission statement down to the critical systems that perform that mission and the actions that take place on those systems to perform that mission. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Captain George Ucci. I work with Major Amin over here at the 834th COS. I've been with the here at Lackland for about a year and a half, and prior to this, I was working in comm support in Korea. So only about a year and a half with respect to cyber. And today, I'll be able to answer your questions about operationalizing cyberspace operations with respect to the Air Force. So introducing standardized Air Force level training, standardization and evaluation of our operations. That's all I have.
All right, so a couple things before we open it up for questions. You know, Major Amin reminded me, when you look at the panel before you, I mean, what we're doing in this arena is so new that I would tell you the average experience is probably less than 4 years, right, for anybody involved that's working this. And we'll be glad and happy, actually, if you're a lead working this arena, to have folks that average 4 years experience. It is that new. Okay, so I didn't mean to do that. My apologies, Rick. I want to talk about the relationship with the CNDSP, and that way if you need to leave, you're welcome to, and then we'll talk bad about you after you leave. No, just kidding. And I'd like to start it with sharing from one of the recent operations that we had. And obviously, by the way, I will say this too, there's an internal struggle going on, right, for what we're presenting to you today. So we have a desire, do I need to do something? All right. We have a desire to inform what we're doing, but at the same time, we also have a desire to not overly inform because we don't want to give away too much, right, about all the different things we do. So we'll talk as much as we can, but just bear with us if you get some general examples rather than specific examples. So I just ask for your patience in that. So I will tell you, I define the relationship between CPTs and the CNDSP as one that is necessary, and at least right now within 24th Air Force, it is a good working relationship. I think within the Air Force anyway, the benefit and the reason that has come along and the improvement has happened is because we both work for the same two-star, the same NAF commander. It is a forcing function and one that has absolutely helped. And I will say, I've watched it grow since about 2008. We weren't CPTs at the time, but we were doing similar missions. But I've watched it grow from one that you might view as non-cooperative to now one that we work together. And one of the driving functions for that, and the reality of it is the 24th Air Force concept of employment in terms of defensive cyberspace operations. Because here's the reality. And here's why the relationship is necessary. So CNDSP is to the enterprise as CPT is to the enclave, right? I will tell you, for the most part, the SOPs and the TTPs, so standard operating procedures, tactics, techniques and procedures that we employ are relatively the same, right? The question is, at what level does the AF Cyber Commander wish to initiate that? So if it's at the enterprise level, he's going to call on CNDSP forces to do that. If it's at the enclave, he's going to call on CPTs to go do that. The thing that we have to be mindful of, and the reason that relationship is absolutely crucial, is because we don't need blue on blue. So let me give you an example from one recent operation. There was as you know, one of the most public exploits was released, and I'll just say it had to do with the bash, right? And that's about the most information I'll give in terms of the rest of that story. But one CPT was out on a mission defending key terrain, and they noticed that this exploit came through. Right now, it wasn't successful, but we were able to, because we knew what it looked like, we were able to determine that it was happening. And so the CPT lead at the time picked up the phone and called a crew commander at the CNDSP and said, hey, are you doing stuff here? Right? Is this you? And the answer came back, yes. Now, why is that important? because we didn't have to spend a whole lot of time, right, trying to track that down and figuring out if we had a compromise on our hand or not. And the only reason, right, that we were able to do that was because we had a relationship. We, the CPTs, along with the CNDSP, had that relationship in order to determine that there was nothing else to be done. Okay. Now, I'm going to move on for a moment. Now, keep your questions in mind if you have them about that relationship. I want to talk about one other topic before, and then either I'll open it up for questions or we might get some forced questions so you can see some of the areas that they've come here prepared to discuss. One of my big complaints since 2008 has been that within the Air Force, right, we don't do a good job training people how to plan, right? And if you're going to do defensive cyberspace operations, if you're going to define, map, prioritize, and defend key terrain, you don't just go out and start in the middle, right? Starting in the middle is getting an operator on the keyboard and going trying to defend it. It all starts with planning. And I'm looking around to see if I got any Army brothers around here. Oh, there we go. So the Army gets it right? I mean, let's talk about a lieutenant for the moment. A lieutenant comes in and is a platoon leader, right, and eventually gets to be company commander. Guess what they're doing every single day, right? They are doing mission planning. You come into the Air Force, and I will share this real quick. Shortly after getting to the 92nd, we went out on a mission, and I talked to the mission commander, and I said, hey, let's go over your plan. And I come in the room, and I'm looking for the plan, and I'm like, where is it? And he says, it's right here, right? And so that's the problem that we had for a long time. And one of the things I'm grateful that the Air Force has done, right, we now graduate people from the Air Force Weapons School, right? They are what we call patches, cyber patches, and it is their job to teach planning, briefing, execution, and debrief. So for those of you who don't know, that's the Air Force mission planning cycle. And so while cyber is special, it's not unique, and we heard that before in the previous panel, right? We are absolutely taking advantage. We are taking proven military planning techniques and simply applying it to cyber. There's no need to develop anything new, right? I mean, when cyber first became the big word, we were all developing something new. There's nothing different. And notice, by the way, it doesn't say defense of cyber key terrain, right? For some reason in cyber, we like to throw that word out quite a bit. We tag it along. You heard the captain talk about functional mission analysis. The proper term of it is functional mission analysis cyber. Why are we doing that? Right? And so what we're trying to do and what we're trying to show you here today is the way you go about doing all this stuff is to treat it like a proper military operation. Okay. So with that, I'm going to actually pick on you, Captain Gould, and I'm going to ask the first question.
Yes, sir.
And then if you have questions, please line up when you see I'm getting near the end. But can you, since we're actually here to talk a lot about what encompasses functional mission analysis, right? Can you go over the relationship of the cybercom concept of operation, right, and how we are employing that within the cyber protection teams in order to do functional mission analysis?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So with the new addition of the cybercom concept of employment and concept of operations when it comes to cyber protection team missions, like I said earlier, we're kind of shifting the paradigm here from focusing on network defense to mission assurance and mission defense. So in order to do that, we've broken out our missions into a three-step process. There's survey, secure, protect. On the front end, there's planning, like Colonel Lemaire mentioned. On the back end, there's recovery, which is just recovering forces and starting the process over again on a new mission. So that FMA, that functional mission analysis portion, really takes place in the survey portion of the mission. So up front, before you ever get on a network, before you ever plug in a laptop, before you ever plug in any equipment, you need to know what that key terrain looks like, why it's important, why the supported commander that you're there hired to help secure their mission and ensure their mission, why they deem that equipment important, and what's going to fail if one of those systems fails on your watch. So it's a top-down analytical approach based on systems theory where we initially meet with the commander, so normally the 06 or above. So right now we're working in air operations centers. So we'll take the air operations center commander's words and vision of my mission is this. And we will convert that through interviews with their operators, interview with their maintainers, and interviews with their architects. So it's not just, we're not just there talking to the IT folks, we're talking to everyone, the people that use the system, the people that maintain the system, and the people that design the system. Because really, you might get a different answer from all three of them, and you need to be able to translate between them all, get them in the same room and figure out what's really going on here and why is it important. So then, like I said, the end result is that key terrain, and the key terrain is not just, it's not everything. So everything is not the right answer anymore. You're not there to protect the building. You're there to protect just those systems that will lead to critical mission failure on that commander's part. So thank you.
Yeah, so a couple of keywords I want you to clue in on there. Notice this is not a cyber mission. What do I mean by that? These are cyber folks, right, going out but talking to the commanders or the threes who are carrying out operations on behalf of the commander, and it is understanding what's important to them. I will tell you, if it's a bunch of cyber folks going out doing the functional mission analysis, you're probably doomed to fail from the start, right? Because the key here is to eventually get to and defend what's important to that commander. And so where cyber becomes key in this is to determine, okay, if these are the mission priorities as laid out by the commander or the three, right? How does that map to the systems that are in fact delivering that key information to the warfighter? But most importantly, how do I know what to defend? We ask the commander what's his priority or his or her priority in order to go out and defend. So I want to be very clear, right? This is a commander program, not a cyber program. We happen to do cyber ops to carry it out, but that's the part of it. It is absolutely critical that we engage with the commander. Now, in order to effectively do functional mission analysis, there's training that's involved. So Major Crapo, I'm looking at you. What I'd like you to do is discuss that training pipeline in terms of how you get people prepared to go out and do defensive cyberspace operations.
Thank you, sir. Good segue. Appreciate that. So training pipeline, one of the things that makes the Air Force a little unique in the way that we're employing cyber protection teams is the fact that we have what we call a weapon system. And ultimately all that really is it's a laptop with a set of tools that we've decided that these are great tools, both commercial off the shelf as well as government produced. So along that, we have to get folks that are trained up to use the weapon system and trained to employ the concepts of the cyber protection teams itself. So we have two sets of guidance that we're marrying together. One is the Air Force guidance on what it takes to be trained to operate the weapon system, and the other is the guidance from Cybercom, which is how we actually perform the mission. So starting in the very beginning, when we first get a new lieutenant or first get a new airman, actually cross-trainee for 1 Bravo 4s, that's our enlisted career field for the cyber operator. We get those folks in, they go through their initial training, skills training back at the schoolhouse down in Keesler Air Force Base, and they get the basic foundation across the board so everybody's on the same level in terms of having the same base knowledge. From there, depending on what mission they're going to, if they come to the cyber protection teams or a squadron with the cyber protection teams, they'll break off and go to the 39th Information Operations Squadron down in Hurlburt, which is the next level of training for them. This is actually the beginning of what we would call the weapon system training or initial qualification training, IQT. So they go through a lot of training down there. I believe right now it's about, how long is CWO?
CWO portion is 8 weeks.
CWO portion is 8 weeks, which is conceptual, and then we do specific weapon system training on top of that for about 4 weeks. At that point, you finally get to go to your squadron. And from there, we take you into the house, and we give you what's called master qualification training, which is very, very specific to what we're doing in-house as a mission and how we're employing the weapon system. For us, since we have service reallocated teams, our mission is a little different from a COCOM team like Major Amin, so we have in-house MQT. Once you get certified, that gets you at the basic level of being able to operate the weapon system. At that point, it's now a lot of OJT, where you're actually learning how to employ it to support the concept of operations that Cybercom has delineated down to us. And that's the point where we're at today, is developing that next level of training so our cyber operators are also learning critical thinking, planning skills, and stuff beyond the technical, which they get in a very formal schoolhouse environment. So that's where we are with the challenge. We've been working a lot with trying to look around the board, both commercial entities as well as our joint brethren, and of course to Cybercom for guidance on how we get to that next level. And I'll tee that off to you to explain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'll wait.
All right. Adding to the training, of course, within the Air Force, obviously utilizing the weapon system, it is very tool-specific training to how we employ our weapon system. But what is missing there is really the methodologies, especially within the CPT construct. As Captain Gould alluded to earlier, we have those three phases that we go into when we do CPT operations, right? The secure, or the survey, the secure, and the protect. We are able to do that with our tools, specifically within the Air Force. But what we didn't get clear, what we lack is the clear guidance on how we employ the actual team. The work role specific to the individual within that specific assigned duties within a squad. And within a CPT, you have 5 squads. Which are the DCI, the CTT.
Say the words.
Okay.
Not the DCI.
Yes. So DCI, the defensive and counter. Now it's moving. What's that? Infiltration. Sorry. Thanks. And then we have the CTE, the counter threat emulation. We have MP, which is the mission protection. CS, cyber support, and the CR, which is the cyber readiness squads. So the one thing that we did miss was the actual employment of those specific squads. So what we are working on now, levied by U.S. Cybercom, is to come together with all those services and develop methodology training specific to those squads, those work roles, those positions. And that is one thing that we just started about 4 months ago. And we are actually meeting up and having weekly meetings with U.S. Cybercom and other entities, other services, to develop the training.
All right, so I'll make 2 quick points, but if you have questions, please go ahead and go to the mic, and then I'll get to you right after these two quick points. One, I want to touch on, Major Crapo talked about the training, how you go to the 39th IOS, and I'm going to embarrass somebody for a moment, but we have the next commander of that unit in the audience. Major P.H. Waters is going to go and take command of that unit sometime this summer. But the reason I bring it up is for those of you who are familiar, and right, we are airmen, right? And so we talk about things through the airman's mindset. And so the formal training unit is one of those things, right? So if I am a Viper driver, an F-16 pilot, right, I'm going to go after my initial training, I'm going to go to an FTU to get my initial qualification on that aircraft. We're doing the same thing in cyber, except here's a difference. Here's one unique difference. We only have one formal training unit for all 7 cyber weapon systems, right? That's not how we do it in the air world. It'll be interesting to see as we progress whether or not we stand up additional FTUs or not, but that's a conversation for another day. It's just a key difference because, we try to compare everything to air, not everything is comparable, right, in that regard. Second point, when it comes to the CNDSP, one other thing I want to hit on. The 318th Cyberspace Operations Group Commander recently held, I'll call it a get-together. So one of the units within the wing, the 688th, they develop cyberspace capabilities. And they develop defensive cyberspace capabilities as well. And so the group commander brought everybody together so we can talk about our requirements. And what we learned there is the cyber protection teams had put in some requirements to do defensive cyberspace operations that when Colonel Woolley heard them, she said, I need to do the same thing for CNDSP. So I go back to why did that happen? Because we had the relationship, right, between CPT and CNDSP. So now we're making enterprise forces better and enclave forces better because as they also develop defensive capabilities for the CNDSP, we look to determine if they could be employed within the enclave, and if so, we incorporate it within that as well. So absolutely critical link with the CNDSP. So with that, sir, your question.
Sure. Jay Kinder, recently retired from U.S. Cyber Command. Don't blame me. Don't hate.
We do.
You know, I was at Fleet Cyber and a peer getting my butt kicked in the cyber domain side by side, so it was good. Later on, I took over Joint Force Headquarters for Fleet, so I got a chance to see both sides. So it's still basically true. Services build, maintain, protect, and operate networks. So the whole model continues to work when you build a weapon system that supports Air Force networks. But we're also, and you're also, building joint teams that you will lose OPCON to, probably retain ADCON, so you're still training. How do you develop a kit for DODN and for a combatant commander that potentially isn't residing on an Air Force network? How do you do that?
I tell you, we use the same kit.
Yeah.
So, because really, mission assurance and defensive cyberspace operations should be network agnostic, right? System agnostic. So we are building tools and capabilities that work on different types of cyber systems and infrastructure, and different types of, I'll say, OSs, right, within systems. I will tell you, I won't go into the details, but this is where it's also great to have a unit that builds defensive capabilities for us. One of the cyber protection teams went out and on a mission and noticed, they get tested by the Air Force Red Team, right, and other Red Teams, and they noticed a particular tactic. And we didn't have a tool to go against that tactic. So we put a requirement into the 90th Cyberspace Operations Squadron, and within 24 hours, they gave an initial capability. Now, did it find everything? No, but we then went on a 24-hour cycle where the operators would say, I needed to do this. And I tell you, by the end of that time, so in less than 2 weeks, we had a tool that was completely capable of seeing that type of activity on the network.
Yeah. So, for instance, you're going to take an Air Force team. Now, I know you don't do command and control them when they go to DODN.
Right.
Hypothetical, they've got to deploy to a Navy unit on a Navy network. Has it happened yet?
So, okay.
Because I know the Navy standard answer is no.
This is where that internal debate that I told you about with getting information out but not giving too much comes in. There is a team right now on Navy ships, plural, ships, doing exactly that. I won't go into any other details, so the answer is yes, and it's happening right now. That team, boy, you want to talk about an interesting C2. You asked about C2, right? So that team is OPCON that team is TACON to an organization forward that's not part of the Navy to go do work on a Navy ship. OPCON is maintained back home, though. So the AF Cyber did not relinquish OPCON. It is a service reallocated team, but that is part of the discussion, right? Yeah. So why not relinquish OPCON?
Because it's got to go through the SecDef orders book, and then it's hard to get back. So I can see why. Now that's great. So the point is you're building the aircraft while you're flying it.
Absolutely.
And you guys are writing the doctrine, and that's the right thing to do. Because us old toads, we're not going to get it. We'll just grade the homework. Oh, you spelled meathead wrong. There's a hyphen, I think, in there. But
Colonels
you guys
are good
doing
at that.
Yeah. You guys are going to do it. So good for you to be part of this, even though it's new. Good for you.
Sir, could I jump on for one?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that you alluded to in the very beginning, or you asked about, was the capability and how we're actually setting our teams up for success regardless of where they're going. One of the important pieces about the weapon system that we're using is it's just that. It's a capability. It is not specific to the AFNet. It is not specific to look for things on the AFNet. It is set up to do an assessment, to do an evaluation of the network or the enclave as soon as we plug in. So it is agnostic. In terms of the teams that we're providing to Cybercom, of course, we have the different flavors. Each flavor of team, depending on their command and control structure, will dictate what type of tools they use. Currently, as the service reallocated teams, we have our weapon system that we employ, but even our teams right now that are with some of the COCOMs didn't have a solution for capability, so we actually did have a weapon system. We said, we've got this. It works, and it's obviously not perfect, nothing is, but it's something we've developed, and they've allowed those teams to use that capability because there wasn't another option. With that capability comes a great chain of money, which is great, and support, the back end that goes along with the weapon system, the developers that are sitting in the 90th, the testers that are sitting in the 346th, the training that comes from the 39th. All of that has to do with the fact that we actually have a weapon system that's codified and goes through a program management office just like we do with a lot of other systems in the Air Force. So it definitely is not agnostic to specifically the Air Force network. It's a capability that can be used across the board, and we've definitely proven that with our current team that's out there right now.
And I will tell you, the hardest part is not physically connecting to the network. The hardest part is getting the approval to connect to the network, right? Reciprocity means different things to different people. So we're working out through all those issues.
So
Yes,
this is Cornelia. I just wanted to add one quick thing. Sorry, I'll step back. You're absolutely right. We need to stop thinking about these as the Navy network, the Air Force network, because the bad guys don't care, right? So from a CNDSP perspective, I want to be able to plug those guys in wherever, and I want to be able to also accept Navy and Army teams if I need them, right? The only way we get to that point is to treat them like a weapon system to that capability, and then the only thing you need is the access, which Colonel Romero was just talking about. But that access packaging, I mean, it's much bigger than just IT. It's all about everything that we're doing in 24th with the Cyber Sortie, Ready Cyber Crew program that you heard General Murphy talk about this morning as well. So we need to move that forward and all the services as well to really make this happen. So
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question. How do you prioritize which commander is able to receive your services? Because I'm sure that there's a much larger list than probably what you're able to do. So how do you prioritize that? And then my other question is, for the cost of the actual hardware and stuff that you may have to employ to be able to protect that commander system, would that come out of his budget, or do you have your own budget? And if so, if you have your own, then how do you prioritize who gets what money?
So those are two very easy answers. So the first one, the Secretary of Defense prioritizes who gets what. Which combatant commander gets the teams, right? That's an order issued by him to the services, right? And so we follow that order. General Wilson, as the AF Cyber Commander, does have a certain number of those teams available for him to use, I'll say at his discretion. And so it doesn't mean, remember I told you one of the teams that we had was a JFHQ Doden team. Believe it or not, the team that's out on this other network isn't that team. It's actually a service reallocated team that's doing that mission on the Navy network. So General Wilson prioritizes the work of those 6. And the way that he prioritizes, it's done through both his the component NAF staff as well as the 624th Operations Center, making the suggestions. And he gets a briefing every week, right, to tell the NAF and the wings what our forces are going to be used for. Because remember, we're doing OT&E, right? We don't maintain any operational control. You know, once they are presented to AF Cyber, General Wilson owns them, not the 688 Cyberspace Wing. Or in the case of combatant commander CPTs, that combatant commander owns them, not even General Wilson. So the combatant commander will determine what the priorities are for those teams. And some are better than others. One in particular has already identified all the different mission areas that they want them to go out and do for the year. And I forget your second question dealt with, the money. So Major Crapo touched on this, so I'll answer it for you, sorry. Remember, the system we use has been designated a weapon system by the Air Force. As such, it has a SPO, right, and a PMO, so a Program Management Office. The command, so AF Space, works with the SPO to work all those priorities. We submit it, right, and we come together, and there's an AF Space team that comes together to prioritize what those changes need to be, and then it's actually I don't see him here, but LCMC, the Lifecycle Management Center, has an office here that takes care of all of those. I'll say fielding and not decisions, but implementation of the fielding decisions made by the Major Command. Does that help?
jump on from the Air Force perspective, from the service reallocated team perspective. Of course, our priorities are set by General Wilson, but the way that that's being done right now is his staff has gotten together and done the strategic level plan of where do we need to put our resources in terms of defense of the Air Force mission systems. That includes, you're talking about your command and control systems, other weapon systems for the warfighter, as well as backup and support systems for those systems. So that strategic plan is in draft right now, but it's already been done through at least a year of development with a lot of big brains, bigger than mine, putting that together. So we've got that piece, and it has a prioritized list of where we want to put resources. The second step to that is now in the operational level. We're taking that list and we're breaking down every single category into the individual systems that fall into that category. So those are your two levels, your strategic and your operational. And then finally at the tactical level, all of that gets handed off to the 624th Operations Center, which if you heard Colonel Dombrowski's speech yesterday, he talked a lot about command and control from there. But that operational center takes that big, long, prioritized list, looks at the requirements coming in from the other side of the house and tries to marry those up. And if not, they'll go out and start at the top of the list and say, okay, what systems out there are at the top of this list that we're not hearing anything about? And they'll go do some research. But in the end, he ends up with a prioritized list of locations and systems that he needs to put resources against. He takes all of his cyber protection teams from a service reallocated perspective, and we're in a big list, and 1 through 5 might be currently tasked, so number 6 gets the next thing on the list. They go out and do, and while that happens, number 1 might finish off their mission, and they get the next mission on the list. Those operational costs also are part of the Cyber Mission Force dollars that are given back to the services from Cybercom as part of that larger construct because we're filling in those teams. So that prioritized list and how that money is spent is, again, falls on the AF Cyber Commander in this sense. But he's got a very good deliberate process to make that happen using the same planning that we do as airmen across the board. So we're really trying to push that into the cyber realm a lot more as opposed to being reactive, trying to be a lot more deliberate, both with spending our money and where we're putting our resources and teams.
All right, so we have about 15 minutes left, thereabout. What I'm going to do, we'll take your question, and then we have one panel member that I've withheld him speaking about his area, but that's his punishment for being the most junior member of the panel. And then we'll let him talk about some of the standardization because it actually flows, right? You heard about the training pipeline, and then you heard about the additional training in terms of the joint. Well, you got to maintain those standards, right? And so he'll talk about that because he is the chief of stand eval for one of our squadrons. But we'll first let Captain Davis ask his question.
Yes, sir. Thanks. So Captain Davis, former Command CPT lead. We do have another example of I actually led a team out on a Navy system out in Hawaii. It's a terrible location. But, so because we do have the weapon system construct, it comes with a certification and accreditation package, which is from the AF Space DAA. But from there, it's just working with the Navy, the Fleet Cyber DAA, working with their CNDSP, and also with the if there's a program management office with their configuration control boards and making sure that they accept the risk of us plugging into their system. So, and sir, for you, and maybe also with Colonel Woolley, do you foresee a functional alignment between the CNDSP and the CPTs, since more or less the CPT is an extension of the CNDSP, to maybe put them in the same wing together?
I'm not sure how to respond to your question, Captain. So, I would like to see, this is Chad Lemaire's view, I would like to see the CNDSP actually part of the CMF construct. Right now it is not. Right. But I think it's not a fair statement to say that the CPT is an extension of the CNDSP. That it is not. So the CNDSP has a role, but the CPT has a role, and they, while similar in terms of the SOPs and TTPs like we talked about, the rationale and the reason behind what they're doing is different. So I would keep that in mind, but it underscores the need. So I'll go back to Chad Lemaire's personal opinion. Would I like to see them within the same group in the Air Force? Yes. Will that happen? I don't know. In that regard, I would like to see, and I tell you what, you want to talk about, I'll say forced. It doesn't have to be forced. You want to talk about forced integration, make them work for the same 06, and you'll get
Right.
forced integration. So I'll let Colonel Woolley talk about what she might think about that.
So I would agree. I think a couple things. Number one, they're not an extension. They really are a whole different, because you're working on completely different terrain. But there is a place where these guys, they're a low density, high demand asset, and they can't protect everything. So eventually they're going to probably have to get off that terrain and hand it over to a CNDSP. And it may be us, it may be somebody else, it may be the Navy, it may be a space CNDSP. There's 23 across the DoD. We're still working on that. But the problem they have is different authorities. So under the same group, I think would be very good. But right now, we're not part of the CMF. Air Force is unique in that. And I think it's been a good thing. We've been able to build these synergies and do a whole lot more than we would have in the other services. And I think we've proven that out. And a lot of stuff we can't talk about here. Right. But that we're doing a lot of really good work. And that relationship is key. If they were in the same group, it'd be great. But it would make my job a whole lot more difficult because of the authorities problem.
Right, and there are some things that a CPT, like you kind of said, I hesitate, that a CPT is going to be able to find that your CNDSP wouldn't. But the reason the relationship is crucial is then you could pass it to the to the CNDSP, so that now enterprise, and I would tell you it works the other way. When the CNDSP finds out about something, they should be passing it to the CPTs that are out on mission, so that they can look for that within the enclaves that they're a part of. All right, so with that, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to have to make sure that my operators are trained to a certain standard, right? And so to talk about that a little bit, we'll have Captain Uchi.
Thanks, sir. And so with respect to Air Force operations, if you're familiar with Air Force operations in general, air crew, special ops, intelligence, there's things that come with, those things come with a structured training mechanism. So training is structured. Standardization and evaluations are structured for all those operations. So you are required to meet a certain level of expectations, standards before your commander allows you to go out to perform operations. And what we're trying to do here with cyberspace is the same thing, is to bring those standardizations and evaluations to our organizations and how we conduct our cyberspace operations. So to give you an example, there's many ways of looking at, for example, or validating a vulnerability, a cyberspace vulnerability. And one of the difficulties with cyber is that there's many ways of doing that. I mean, to capture that and to standardize that across all the different platforms, OSs that we look at, the different types of key terrain that we look at is a very monstrous task of itself, just for those vulnerabilities. So trying to operationalize, that's the word for the training structure and standard eval function, trying to operationalize the cyberspace operations within the Air Force and with respect to the set of tools, the weapon system that we use is very difficult, but I think in the end worthwhile, so we can have a certain level of standards that all of our operators can meet and be ready for mission to conduct our operations. And so that's what I'm in charge of at the unit level.
I know the title of this, as you see, was defensive key terrain and cyberspace operations, and we've touched on a lot. But the reason we decided with this approach is to start at the beginning of the story, right? Because it's one thing to come in and tell you how you can define it. There's a functional mission analysis process, right? Methodology for how you go about doing it. But the reality is, none of that happens, right, if you don't have the weapon system with the training pipeline, right, with the standardization evaluation, with the ability to prioritize your weapon system needs, right, and get them implemented. And so I want you to leave here with that as part of the takeaway, right, that it's not just how do I defend it. To defend it properly, right, takes an entire system and process put in place that involves a conversation, a relationship between commanders, cyber folks who are on CPTs, and then the CNDSP. Because I tell you, CNDSPs, here's one of the things that I'll touch on as well. So CPTs are focused and temporary in nature, to overgeneralize it, right? I'm not going to take a CPT and put them, well, okay, in theory, guys, I get it. You're not going to put them out on a mission and leave them there forever. Now, we've left some people there for years, not the appropriate thing, in my opinion, but we've done that. But it's to put them out on the mission. We used to use the terms clear, sweep, and hold, right, or build. And so they're there to clear the terrain and make sure that the adversary's not there. And then the goal is to turn it over to somebody. So I'm going to touch on something real quick that I haven't, because I think this is key in terms of what the Air Force proper is going to, and it involves relationship with the CNDSP as well. But there's something that the Air Force is now calling Com Squadron Next. Some of you may have heard it referred to as Cyber Squadron of the Future, right? What is that? So I'm going to do something that I don't like to do, because I'm going to use a term that's like. But I think it's the best way to overgeneralize and give you an idea of what that unit does. So that's the comm squadron that's at the wing level. That's going to do what you heard these CPTs do, right? Here's the problem right now. A CNDSP is responsible for the enterprise, but there are certain LIMFACs that we can't get into, and I refuse to get into, that they have. There are certain situations which warrant a CPT to go out and do, and that CPT can go down to the lowest level. The problem is we have a handful of them available, right, for the Air Force's Cyber Commander. So the question is, how do I get that capability at every Air Force base? And that answer is Com Squadron Next. At least that's my take on it. And what that is, it's providing those com squadrons with CNDSP and CPT both like and light capabilities. We've looked at both of the weapon systems. We've determined what the processes, procedures, tools, and training were required for the comm squadron, and we built a system so that it's interoperable with both CNDSP and CPTs, so that we can deliver that to the comm squadrons in the future, so that they can then do exactly this: defense of key terrain and cyberspace operations. So back to my point about CPTs. Remember, focused and temporary. And so the goal is, when I'm done with that mission, I need to turn it over to somebody, right? And there's going to be one of two entities we're going to turn that over. I say we. CPTs are going to turn that over to. One, if they have a Comm Squadron Next unit at that base, we'll turn that mission over to them. Two, the other one is, we'll turn it over to the CNDSP. And we're now, I know we've done at least one, and Pam, you'll have to help me. Is it just one so far? We just did our first one where we had a CPT on a mission literally for years that we were able to successfully pull off mission by transferring, right? We provided no lapse in coverage to the mission partner, but we went from the CPTs doing the mission to now the CNDSP doing it. It's just it's a matter of where you're focusing your effort for that defense. So we realized that the enclave is clear, at least as far as we can determine, and so we brought that defense level up and turned it over to the CNDSP for them to now provide defense of that key terrain and cyberspace operations. We probably have time for one more question, I would imagine, if anybody is willing. We have a taker. Or two, if you want.
Georgia Tech Research Institute. Can you tell me how the joint information environment is going to affect your current planning and your operations in the future?
And it's not because I don't want or I can't. We are literally, I'll answer it this way. So you heard him talk about the 346 Test Squadron, and you want to talk about a relationship with the CNDSP? Oh boy. So Colonel Woolley actually comes over every so often to brief the 688th Cyberspace Wing Commander on the JRSS and the progress, because right, they're the operators, but we have the test folks that are trying to figure out. But here's what I'll tell you. The Air Force's stance on I'll answer it this way. The Air Force has always said, right, we will move over to JIE and JRSS when it provides the same level of security that the Air Force is currently getting. So we need to first determine at what point it provides that same level of security, and then we can figure that out. But we are trying to figure it out. The problem is it's not at the level that it needs to be at the moment for us to be able to make that determination. And I'm going to look over here to see if I've left anything or should say something else. I know. Well, I won't go there.
So I would tell you that it's going to make it better. So when we get there, and I don't know when that's going to be, hopefully in the next couple of years, and we get all the devices up at the enterprise level, it'll actually make defense of the cyber terrain easier because it'll make all of us be able to see the traffic a lot easier. It'll make that problem that they have of being able to plug into those systems. Hopefully we'll get to a point where we'll have reciprocity in authorities to connect. And so the future is bright, but the pathway to get there is still a little murky. Does that answer your question?
Clear as mud. All right, this will be the last question, unless Mr. Lipsey said otherwise. All right.
Colonel, thank you so much for this great panel. I'm sorry, I didn't understand one thing. We met some officers from the squadron at here, and their wing was in Scott Air Force Base. Is that
the wing or the group? Probably the group. So I'll answer this way.
I mean, are you from there? Are you from Scott Air? I mean, what are the different wings in the Air Force?
It's a great question, and it's a good one to end this panel on, because I'll start it off from the high and go down to the low. Within 24th Air Force, right? 24th Air Force is ultimately, Air Force's cyber is ultimately charged with doing defense of key terrain and cyberspace operations for the Air Force, right? So within that component NAF, there are two wings and a group, but we'll talk about the wings. So there's the 67th Cyberspace Wing. Within that wing is Colonel Woolley's group, the 26th Cyberspace Operations Group. They do, among other things, they do the enterprise defense of the Air Force network. They also operate and maintain the Air Force network, right? That's the 690th Cyberspace Operations Group does that. So that's all contained within the 67th Cyberspace Wing. Now, yes, so while the group headquarters and wing headquarters are here locally, some of their squadrons, though, are spread about the world, actually. So Europe, Hawaii, the U.S., other places that I'm sure that I missed. The other wing is the 688th Cyberspace Wing. I'll only touch on one group, two groups. So within two groups we have where we have our cyber protection teams. So the 318th Cyberspace Operations Group, that's where Major Crapo and Captain Gould are from. They do some of the service reallocated CPTs that we talked about. The 318th also has the 90th Cyberspace Operations Squadron that we've talked about that do development of those defensive capabilities. The 688th Cyberspace Operations Group is headquartered at Scott Air Force Base. They have 5 cyber protection team squadrons assigned to them, 3 of which are here at Lackland, 2 of which are at Scott Air Force Base. So you probably met with, like, the 834th, I would imagine, is who you might have met with. 836 then. So the 836 is one of those squadrons that fall under the 688th Cyberspace Operations Group, which is part of the 688th Cyberspace Wing. The wing headquarters is here. The group headquarters is at Scott. The squadron is here. Maybe confusing, but that's how that goes down to that. So I think with that, we are right on time, Mr. Lipsey. Again, thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Colonel Lemaire, to you and all the panel members. You're operating in an incredibly dynamic environment. As you said, you're building the airplane while you're flying it and doing a great job. So thanks very much for sharing those insights with us.
Sir. And thank you. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for making the time to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think Colonel Woolley was an honorary panel member.
So before everyone runs away, let me share just 2 quick announcements with you. For those who have gotten the lunch tickets, we've got lunch being served now through 1 o'clock. But I would encourage you to consider doing that quickly and coming right back, because we're about to have another track session that's going to start at 12:30, bottom of the hour. That session is going to be focused on EW integration. So there's been an awful lot of talk about how there are parallels and intersections between the cyber world and the ISR world and the EW world. So you'll have an opportunity to hear from a local electronic warfare squadron commander. So be back here at 12:30 for that. Thank you very much.